up, Guardians? Today we're covering 4 meta Titan builds that will absolutely dominate endgame content in Destiny 2. These builds will offer you everything ranging from outputting high boss DPS, ways to constantly gain overshield, and even ways to shatter everything. Let's get into it. The first build on the list is a tried and true classic that seems to excel in nearly all facets of the game. With this build, we bring 3 things that pair perfectly together. Consecration allows you to send out 2 waves that will scorch and then ignite enemies, dealing a ton of AoE damage and wiping out waves of enemies. This pairs perfectly with the Frenzy Blade melee to give you 3 separate melee charges, and to top it all off, we bring Knockout, which not only heals you on melee kills, but also increases your melee damage. This is a very strong mid-game rotation that allows you to wipe out a ton of enemies, and the real power comes from our exotic. We bring the class exotic with Spirits of Inmost Light and Star Eater. The other option we have is to run Spirit of Synthoceps instead of Star Eater. That way you can boost the damage of your Consecration slams, though it doesn't feel as useful in most content. With Spirit of Inmost Light paired with Transcendence and Facet of Balance, you'll be able to constantly spam your abilities and wipe out everything in sight. Then when it comes to the DPS phase, Star Eater will kick in. Unfortunately, this season they nerfed the interactions, so Twilight Arsenal barely gets a boost from it. So the main options you have are Thundercrash for a ton of burst damage, or if you have the right boss, Glacial Quake does some massive damage. And most people think to opt for Curse of the Falling Star for Thundercrash, but with the recent buff to Thundercrash, it now does similar damage with either option, which is why I go for the class exotic for the extra ability energy when we bring Spirit of Inmost Light. And what's the flow for this build? Well, in most scenarios, simply cycle through your abilities as needed to wipe out enemies. I try to keep at least 1 melee charge. That way, if I get low on health, I can quickly get a melee kill. If you run out of abilities or are just in trouble, pop your Transcendence to instantly gain back all of your abilities. I like to cycle between my Prismatic Grenade and my Consecration Slam so that I can get both back at a rapid rate. And when going into a DPS phase, make sure to get all 6 stacks of Feast of Light. That way you can get the most super damage possible, which is why I bring hands-on so that I can have guaranteed orb creation. And when it comes to improving the build, I shoot for 100 in resilience, and then I go for a mix of discipline and strength. Our abilities will carry us through most encounters, so weapons really depend on the activity you're running. Weapons with heal clip are great for giving you another way to heal yourself. And when you're using the stasis super, you can bring Tractor Cannon. That way you can guarantee the most amount of damage possible. For the artifact, if you're bringing a grenade launcher, then rapid impacts and concussive reload are perfect for increasing reload speed and adding in a small weakening effect. And if you are running Thundercrash, make sure to bring Conductive Cosmic Crystal to deal even more damage. This build has been running rampant in the final shape and beyond for good reason. You deal a ton of boss damage and wipe out waves of enemies with ignitions. Hey you! Yeah, you. Are you enjoying the video? If so, remember to leave a like on the video and consider hitting that subscribe button. The second build on the list is brand new with Episode Revenant. With the recent buff to the exotic legs, Peacekeepers, we now have a viable Void Titan build in endgame content. This build is all about generating a ton of Void Overshield and amping up the damage with our submachine guns. So we bring the Manticore to fully take advantage of this. Peacekeepers are now maxing out at a 100% increased damage for submachine guns. Exotic primaries deal more damage to regular enemies, and Manticore buffs itself up to another 100% damage to deal some massive damage per shot. The important thing to note is that the Catalyst is necessary for Manticore. The Catalyst not only provides you with more Void Overshield for getting kills while airborne, but it also refills 12 bullets to the mag with kills or multiple hits against enemies. This is huge since we need 20 hits to reach max stacks of Peacekeepers, and since Peacekeepers only give you the buff for 1 second, you'll need to keep dealing damage in order to keep that buff active. So to make this build even more powerful, we bring an insanely strong aspect, Controlled Demolition, so that void ability damage and volatile explosions will apply volatile to enemies, leading to mass explosions everywhere. This can be easily triggered with the Fragment Echo of Instability, which gives your void weapons volatile rounds after getting a grenade kill. Oh yeah, and all those volatile explosions will heal you and nearby allies. allies, making this great for solo and team content, which is why I also bring Bastion, so that when I get my barricade, I can use it near allies to give everyone nearby a void overshield. Top it all off with Echo of Starvation so that you can gain Devour, leading back to more grenade energy, meaning more volatile rounds, meaning more damage stacked with our powerful submachine gun. And what's the flow for this build? Well, you want to pop your barricade to start an encounter. That way you can have the extra shields and damage resistance. Then get a grenade kill to proc volatile rounds. Score enough hits while grounded with the mana core to power up your anti-grav meter. And when full, take flight to deal some massive damage. In the meantime, throw your grenade anytime you get it back to reproc volatile rounds. And if you come across an overload champ, you can simply shield bash to stun them. For stats, I shoot for 100 resilience and discipline, and then a mix of strength and intellect, since both are important for this build. And as for the weapons, since we're taking the mana core as our main weapon, I like to bring Edge Transit as a solid heavy weapon that can also take advantage of our void weapon surge. Your special weapon can be used as a utility weapon, matching whatever activity you're in. And if you need more crowd control, bring a blinding grenade launcher. It's purely up to you on what weapon you want to bring in this slot. As for the artifact, since a ton of people are running some sort of stasis build, I like to bring Conductive Cosmic Crystal to help deal more damage to stasis debuff targets with all of our abilities. And if you don't mind doing finishers, Total Carnage and Debilitating Wave can be a nice wombo combo, allowing your finishers to give you stacking damage resistance, deal a Void Blast, and even weaken nearby enemies when boosted. Otherwise, you can take your grenade launcher perks or Supernova to occasionally apply weaken after picking up a Void Breach. This build takes you back to the basics of weapon play, allowing you to deal a ton of damage with your primary weapon, all while giving you and your team a ton of healing and damage resistance with Void Overshields. And the next build on the list is incredibly strong this season, and will probably stay that way for quite some time. With the recent rework to Icefall Mantle, it has become an absolute powerhouse of a build. Stasis and shatter damage is very strong right now, so with this build, we aim to cause as much freezing and shatter damage as possible. With the Glacial Grenade, we create 5 large stasis crystals that can deal some pretty good damage. So we bring Whisper of Shards to increase our grenade recharge rate by 500%. This is procced whenever we shatter anything. So we bring the Diamond Lance to constantly create lances that will not only freeze but also shatter targets and crystals. We then bring Tectonic Harvest to create stasis shards and gain more frost armor from those stasis shards, which pairs perfectly with Whisper of Conduction and Chains, so that while you have frost armor, you create a stasis shard after a few kills, and all the shards that you will be creating will now track to you, making it easier to pick them up and gain that frost armor. So we shatter a ton of enemies and crystals, creating a ton of stasis shards, and in the process, gaining frost armor constantly. And this lends itself to our exotic, Icefall Mantle, which now heals you anytime you gain a stack of frost armor, even at max stacks. You generate so many shards and frost armor that you start to feel nearly unkillable. And what's the flow for this build? Well, start by throwing your grenade where a group of enemies will spawn. Your grenade has a really quick cooldown, so make sure to throw it often. Every time you create a Diamond Lance, make sure to slam it into the ground. This gives you and nearby allies frost armor, which again heals you and shatters any nearby enemies or crystals. When low on health, pop your class ability to gain a large burst of health and freeze any nearby enemies. If you have a boss that is optimal for the stasis super, feel free to use it on them. Otherwise, you can use it for the ad clearing portions or wiping out mini bosses. For stats, I shoot for 100 in resilience and discipline, and then I go for as much strength as possible. And there are a few weapons that really help this build become even stronger. Once you get your hands on the new Chill Inhibitor with Envious Arsenal and Bait and Switch, you can pair that with a Stasis Primary to fully take advantage of Weapon Surge. Icebreaker is also a ton of fun, allowing you to cause ignitions by shattering enemies and crystals, which is really easy to do with this build. Otherwise, a Stasis Primary with Rhyme Stealer or a Solar Primary with Heal Clip is great for overall survivability. As for the artifact, we do have a couple perks that we want to bring. The most important perk is Hail the Storm, making it so that shattering crystals will send out ice shards, slowing nearby targets. But this also makes it so that all shatter damage will deal an additional 12% damage when you boost it with a tonic. Crystalline Converter is also fantastic with how many stasis shards that you'll be creating. Not to mention, it will also activate whenever you slam a Diamond Lance into the ground, so that you can create another group of stasis crystals, leading to more overall damage and stasis shards. Then I like to bring my grenade launcher perks like Rapid Impacts, so that we gain increased reload speed for our grenade launchers just by dealing damage with them. And then Concussive Reload, which will now give you a way to easily weaken a boss and deal 15% more damage just by using your grenade launcher. This build is is fantastic for activities like Onslaught or even the new dungeon, offering you a ton of ways to heal and deal AoE damage. And with our final build, we have a Strand Titan build that is just too good. It has gotten a few nerfs over the past few seasons, but to this day, it still excels at providing damage resistance, incredibly high ability damage, and even healing for you and your team. This all stems from the aspect Banner of War. Now, whenever you get a melee kill or a finisher, you gain a stack of Banner of War. Even at 1 stack, this is super strong, giving you full benefits of increased damage for your melee, super, swords, and even glaives. The more stacks you get offers you more healing in return. So clearly we want to use our melee and our super as much as possible, which is where Synthoceps comes in, activating whenever you're nearby at least 3 enemies. With both Synthoceps and Banner active, we get 205% increased melee damage and 80% increased super damage. With healing and damage covered, all we need is ability regeneration and damage resistance, and both of these will come from our beautiful green ball, the Tangle. With Into the Fray, whenever we destroy a Tangle, we get Woven Mail, which is 45% damage resistance, and when we have Woven Mail, we gain an increased 300% melee regeneration. To top it all off, we bring the fragments Thread of Generation for more grapple energy, and Thread of Fury so that damage with a Tangle will give back 10 to 30% melee energy per enemy hit. So what's the flow for this build? Well, you want to start every encounter by getting a melee kill or a finisher to proc Banner of War and start that healing process. After you use your first powered melee, you'll create a Tangle. You then want to use this Tangle on the next set of enemies to proc Woven Mail and gain back melee energy. I love to also grapple to any Tangles I create to gain a free grapple melee. Anytime you come up on a mini boss or boss, be sure to whip out that 1-2 punch shotty for that extra melee damage. When in activities like Onslaught, you can use your super a bit more freely since you'll be getting back a ton of energy from all the melee kills you'll be getting. And for stats, I shoot for 100 resilience and strength, and then I prioritize discipline and intellect. And as for the weapons, a 1-2 punch shotgun is a great idea, giving you 100% increased melee damage and 150% increased melee damage against bosses. If you have the Navigator, it can also be a great option to create a grapple point. That way you can get some infinite grapple melees going. You can even bring a backup healing option like a heal clip weapon such as a Baron Action. Otherwise, this season, a grenade launcher for weakening or tractor cannon for bosses is also a good idea. Besides your grenade launcher perks, the artifact doesn't really apply to this build as of Act 1, so pick whichever perks you like most. This build excels in most scenarios, offering you healing, damage resistance, insane melee and super damage, and most importantly, a ton of fun. Just make sure to stay away from those exploding units. And there you have it, Guardians. We've covered 4 Titan builds that will help you conquer any endgame activity. If you want to see 4 Warlock builds that can do the same thing, go check out this video right here. Remember, mastering these builds is only the beginning. Experiment with different combinations and tweak your loadouts to suit your playstyle, and never stop honing your skills. If you found this video helpful or just enjoyed seeing a new perspective, feel free to like the video and comment down below on what builds you've been enjoying most for Titans. Keep an eye out for future videos as we continue to explore the ever-evolving world of Destiny 2. Until then, may the threads of fate be ever in your favor. This is Lucky Mech, signing off. See you on the next adventure, Guardians.